start? My name is Amanda, and I'm going to be teaching tongue and pulse diagnosis this morning, which is a very big topic in Chinese medicine, which is my training is primarily in Chinese medicine, but I've also studied Western herbal medicine and some Ayurvedic medicine, and kind of like at this point in my practice where I'm really trying to bridge all of these systems and kind of, so I suggested this as a topic for this conference because I think it can offer a lot to just if you're practicing, even if you're just practicing for yourself or if you're working with other people. Some basic skills in tongue and pulse can really help a lot, just to have a little, kind of to help confirm maybe just your diagnosis of, and then which herbs to choose and how to work with people. So this is it's a big system. There's a lot to learn about it, but I'm going to really focus on some things that I think we really can accomplish in a morning class like this that you can feel confident about to work with. So I did want to give a little background, just because I'm going to be referring to some terms. So just to sort of set the stage, I thought to mention yin and yang, because this is like the basic principles in Chinese medicine are based on yin and yang. And some of you may already know about them and you may not, and so I can't assume, so I'm just going to mention a few things and maybe we can make a quick list. So, yin and yang is a system of understanding phenomena and the body. So if we get a good idea of how to kind of make these simple divisions, if you can immediately start to make diagnoses from this. So let's just try to flesh out a few things that you think may be important, like when you're working with someone to understand. I'll put a first one because then it can get you thinking. So yin would be cold and yang would be hot. Okay, big distinction here. One of the most important ones that you can make, I think, in herbal medicine, hot and cold. And this is one of the ones that we're going to make sure that hopefully with tongue and pulse that you'll understand how to see that and feel that. Any others that you think might be applicable to understand?
Moist and dry.
Great. Yes. Probably the next big one. Anything else?
Deficient and excess?
Yes. Oh, this is great. So that's a little bit tricky to fit into the categories, but that's very important, and that is one of the ones we're going to try to understand today. So because you can have, you can definitely have, you can have both of either. So they don't fit exactly. You could have excess or deficiency in either category. So when you say those words, excess and deficiency, I mean, I think most people know what that means, right? It's excess would be just too much of something, or accumulation of something, and deficiency would be not enough of something, kind of more tending towards weakness, or so that's excess deficiency. Anything else popping to mind? Might come here. Let's see. Okay. Oh yeah. Do you have something?
Shady versus sunny, or
Yeah, shade, so like dark and light. Yeah, so we could say dense versus and light. Another really good one is inward or deep. And this would be outward or surface. Sometimes you might hear exterior. It's kind of like all similar meaning there, and then interior. Let's see,
descending or falling versus
yes,
rising.
This is great. You're getting all of them. It's really good. So this would be like...
You teach well.
Thanks. She's been to some of my classes. Down and up, or you can think about like the upper body and the down, like the lower body, or we could be talking about, so yin would be like deep level, like bones, and this outward be skin or upper. So I mean, this is just like instantly so useful clinically once you start making these divisions. Let's see. Make sure I'm not missing some key ones. Those are the big ones I wanted to mention for this division. And then the other thing I wanted to say about yin and yang is just that we, in Chinese medicine anyway, we also start to put all of the organs of the body all of the channel systems of the body, all are divided into yin and yang. So like the yin organs, I'll just change colors here. Anyone know about the yin organs? Which ones those would be? Spleen, liver, kidney. Great. Heart. Yep.
And one more.
There's actually two more.
Two more.
All right, I'll fill in lungs
Of course.
and pericardium. So then, the yang organs would be what?
All the bowel organs?
All the bowel organs. Sometimes they call them the hollow organs.
Yeah.
So anything hollow, like what do you think of when you think about a hollow organ in the body?
Stomach.
Large intestine.
Stomach, I'm going to abbreviate. Small intestine, large intestine,
Bladder.
bladder. They call it urinary bladder. Sometimes you'll see it bladder.
Gallbladder.
Gallbladder. We got most. There's one that's a mysterious one. Anyone know the mysterious one? It's mysterious just because it's not an actual organ.
Triple burner?
Yes.
Triple burn.
Triple burner, so sometimes you see it triple burner. In Chinese they call it san jiao. San is 3, jiao is burner, the 3 burners. And it's a way of dividing the body into the upper, middle, and lower. So it's not technically an organ, but it's a system. It's like a system of processes. So we're not going to go into all that stuff, but I just wanted you to get a sense of these of yin and yang and how these organs. Is there some comment you could make about the difference between all of these organs and these organs? Some like quality that you might say of them.
The dense and hollow?
Dense and hollow, yeah, but there's these yin organs are really the vital organs.
Okay.
So they're really they're like the core. Without them, I mean, we can't really live without them very well, you know. These are, I mean, they're, of course the yang are so important. They're filling and emptying. Those hollow organs are constantly filling and emptying.
Like the support organs.
Yeah, they're sort of a support function. But the yin organs are said to be, they're dense. If you think about the actual flesh of those organs, they're dense. And they're really critical. They're so important. So, yeah, so the key is, of course, in health, balance. We all have yin and yang. We all have all these organs. We all have all of these things, you know. And in nature, we see all of these things. All these seasonal shifts, I mean, we can see yin and yang all the time. Yin is associated in the system of the seasons with the deep, again, this depth, this interior, this, which season do you think that is? When everything goes deep and inward. Winter. So the utmost, they call it utmost winter, utmost yin is winter time. And the opposite is utmost outward is summer. So, and then we have the in-between time, that transition time. And I guess one point I really want to make too is just this unity. That, you know, we can make these divisions, we can understand, and it's helpful to make these divisions for understanding things, especially clinically, so we can start saying, okay, this is what's not working here, really, you know. But ultimately, the reason we can heal is because everything's connected, right? If everything didn't change and move and lead from one thing to the next and then come back around in circles and cycles of seasons, and then it would be fixed, like we couldn't do anything. We wouldn't be alive, actually. So this is really a big system. It's really, I love talking about yin and yang, and I could go on and on about it because it's really fun for me. But that's, I think this is a good place to start. Any questions about that? Okay. So then the next thing I wanted to just also mention is that when we start talking, because basically this is a diagnosis class. Before we get to the diagnosis, I just thought to present the basic causes of illness, just briefly. Just very specific. Yeah, if you mind, that'd be great. Just kind of hold it because it's fragile. So in terms of causes of illness, there's 3 main categories: internal, external, and other. So, and this is important too because I think, like, especially in our culture, we often will skip the inner causes, which in Chinese medicine, that's like a whole category. Talk about the emotions. And so I just wanted to mention that Definitely the emotions, which they list as, there's usually 5 major emotions, but there can sometimes be 7 that they identify. But that these are natural and healthy and when appropriately expressed. But the times when emotions can become causes of illness are when they either are inexpressed or they just continue on for a long time without, being resolved. So, but it's not that they're like, there's no good or bad or anything, ever. It's just that but they can become causes of illness. So that's the internal level. And if you're curious just to know the emotions that they do identify, the 5 main are anger, joy, worry, sadness, and fear. Sometimes they also add into their pensiveness and then shock. So shock is like fear, but it's like a, like more sudden. Fear can be more ongoing. And some people are like, joy? Why is joy in there? But joy also can be inappropriately expressed. So sometimes you see when people like kind of easily laugh at every situation, even if it's like not a funny thing, that can be an imbalance there. Or if it's, so just too much, or the inability to express joy, right? Or to feel joy. So that's internal. The external ones would be, I'll just list these here. So external factors, maybe some of you have heard some of these things, but definitely like cold and hot. So these are said to be like climate factors or external things that can enter the body. Or if we're exposed to them again and again, they can, create cold conditions or hot conditions. Then there's dampness and dry. These are the biggest ones right here. But Chinese medicine also has wind. So like at the end of the class, I hope to have time to just like mention how learning this tongue and pulse diagnosis can help you make distinctions like for treating colds and flus, because wind is said to be cold. When you have a cold, say you have a cold, it's a wind condition, which can then pair usually with either hot or cold. And so making the distinction between hot and cold is so key for choosing which herbs to use. So, but in Chinese medicine you often hear it's a wind-heat invasion or a wind-cold invasion when someone has a cold. But a lot of times it's heat. It's so funny we call it a cold, but I think it's oftentimes heat. And then this other category, so we have the inner, outer, and then other category of illnesses. These would be things like diet, not enough exercise, not enough sleep, or could be either too much or too little of these things, right? And it's relative to the person. What's like enough or too much, this just depends on the person, right? So it's nothing, no like fixed statement about it. And everyone has their underlying constitution, so then like some people tend towards heat, right? So then in the summertime they have to be a little more careful, or they tend towards cold, so they in the winter have to be extra careful. So we have to always consider like the underlying constitution, the seasonal time, when we're choosing herbs and treatments, So that's just some very basic, quick causes of illness. So then, yeah, thanks. So now let's get into diagnosis. So in Chinese medicine, there's 4 methods to make diagnosis. And basically, we're using our senses. So the 4 methods are using, you're looking, you're listening, but they also put smelling in with listening, so listening and smelling. Feeling and asking. So I'll write those on the board here. This one. Looking, hearing and smelling, asking, and feeling. So, basically we're trying to be really good detectives, be really good at like just, a lot of this is just what a lot of healers have this, I think, this kind of tendency to really lean in and be sensitive and pick up on what they see and observe, and so be really good observers. So, looking is big, and this is where the tongue diagnosis comes in under the looking. And hearing and smelling, like listening to the voice, a lot of it is the voice. Is it like really quiet? If someone's really quiet and you can almost hardly hear them, or is they're very like even toned? All of these things mean different things. If someone's really loud, so that's a big one. Like if someone tends to be kind of quiet, tend to be more deficiency. Someone has like a really loud voice, kind of big presence, tend to be more excess. So looking is really big, you know, you can go really far with that. But asking, of course, is huge, you know, so this is a big one that most of the time when you're working with someone, you spend a lot of time on this one, you know, asking them all kinds of questions about their health and the history of what's been going on. And so asking, you know, in Chinese medicine usually they have these classic 10 questions you're supposed to ask. And some of them are obvious, some of them I think are interesting that, you know, not always get asked, like your level of thirst, you know, indicates things, or you know, inability to make decisions and things like that actually lead you to understanding what's going on. So asking is huge, you know, we spend a lot of time on this. But then feeling, this could be any palpatory diagnosis you might do. Feeling the abdomen is a fairly common one, but definitely the pulse falls under this category. Let's see. And in terms of making a diagnosis, we talk a lot about patterns, which we've really been talking about here with all this hot, cold, exterior, interior. That's a pattern when we can see, okay, this is like heat invading at the deep level of the body, you know. So some common patterns you might hear are things like spleen qi deficiency. I don't know how many of you have heard about these, like hearing that kind of stuff. Yeah, spleen qi deficiency or liver qi stagnation. So we're talking about, typically you'll hear things like referring to the qi, sometimes spelled qi, or blood. These are big ones. And then also you'll hear about yin and yang, excess deficiency. So like not enough qi, qi deficiency. Too much qi would be qi stagnation, qi not moving well. Blood, same thing, can be a deficiency, blood deficiency or blood stagnation. And then you can have, again, most commonly you'll hear deficiency for yin. You don't usually hear excess. And for yang, you'll hear more deficiency. That's why when we're making those categories, it's not so easy to say one or the other, but more commonly, if anything starts to happen at the yin and yang level of the body, it's tends to happen later in life. Yin and yang are like our core fundamental elements in our body in a way, you could think of it that way. And they don't typically get deficient until we age, like past maybe more like 60s, 70s, start to see signs of this. But a lot we hear about qi and blood. And then sometimes specifically with the organ. So the qi or the energy, right? Qi is like energy. The energy of the spleen, the energy of the liver, the lung. So I just want to use these words so when we talk about tongue and pulse you can get a sense. If I say qi deficiency, that do you feel like you have an idea of what that means at least? Like to say qi, the energy. If you say just generally qi deficiency, it's really talking about your overall body energy. But then you can zero in and say, oh, this is but the spleen. There's a very common diagnosis, spleen qi deficiency. The spleen is a major digestive organ. So spleen and stomach are paired, and so they can become deficient. All right, so we inspect the exterior of the body to understand the interior of the body. So we're gathering all this information, right? So we can look at the face, we can look at the eyes, look at the tongue, and gather information that'll tell us something about what's happening on the inside. So inspecting the exterior to understand the interior, and then we can use parts to understand the whole. Right, so this is talking a little bit about microsystems, which many people are probably worked with that a little bit, like looking at the eye is a microsystem on its own, the ear, the tongue is a microsystem, the pulse is a microsystem, the abdomen, almost anything, actually. It's kind of fascinating. The feet, yeah, hands and feet, reflexology with the feet. I mean, it's very detailed systems. So, let's see. I'm just going to use the bottom here for a second to say that in the end, this is the simplest way, I think, if you are gathering all this information and it's kind of like, well, how there's some cold, there's some hot, like some it seems exterior in one way and another way it seems. But if you can at least bring it down to understand, they call it the 8 principles. The 8 principles. I think this is a way to really take even very, did I spell that right? That looks funny to me. Is it right? The 8 principles, okay.
C in the eye looks like a G.
Gee,
but
yeah.
It looks like how do you spell it?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So hot, cold. I'm going to abbreviate exterior, interior, excess, deficiency. These are called the 8 principles, and yin and yang. If you're just totally lost, as long as you can start to pull these apart, those are like, you really can go very far with that. So that's my goal, is to help make sure that you have a sense of that. So, right. Any questions so far before we get into tongue? All right, so yeah, let's go ahead and erase it. The 8 principles, did you get those?
I'll leave that on.
Okay, sure. All right, so tongue diagnosis is really fun. So like I said, the tongue is a microsystem, so it's like a map of the body. And so I'm going to draw a tongue.
One drawn red.
Yeah, maybe I will draw in red. Green. All right, so here's our tongue.
Green would fall somewhere in those diagnoses, I believe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, don't see green tongue too often, fortunately, unless someone's had like Kool-Aid or something. Okay. So it's a map. This is the first point to understand, is that when you ask to look at someone's tongue, or you look at your own tongue, understand it as a map. So one easy way is to, again, to divide it into 3 sections. So this will be the upper body, this is the middle body, and this is the, lower body. And this is the tip of the tongue here, right? This is, they call it the root in the tongue. So again, if you forget everything else, if you remember that, just even that right there can tell you a lot. But then we can divide it in further to, like, the organs show up here. All right, so then it's not just the upper body, but the very tip is the heart. And the lungs are here. Then here, this whole midsection is the spleen, stomach. Or another way to just think of that is the digestive organs. That's Chinese medicine, that's what those are. The sides of the tongue are the liver and gallbladder. The back of the tongue is the kidney, bladder, and intestines, both small and large. Alright, so that's the map. And then from there, when we're looking at the tongue, you can see all kinds of things, right? So there's kind of some key categories that you're going to look for. You're going to look at the body, what they call the body color, the body shape, the coating, and the moisture. So, when you're looking at the body color, that means basically just like the overall color of the tongue. And this typically reflects the state of the yin organs, those yin organs we were talking about, those main organs. A normal, healthy tongue would be pale red. But if you start to see like more intense red, or like, bright red or dark red, all red, like basic, and this is true for the eyes, the face, anything on the body actually. If you see like intense red color, it's heat. Red equals heat. So right here, this is huge. If you remember that, it just can help you so much. Oh, this is a heat condition. Oh, very common thing to see on the tongue is a red tip. Tip of the tongue, very common anymore. I see it all the time. Red tip, heat in the heart, anxiety usually. It can show up as insomnia. Those are the 2 big things. If you see a red tip tongue, you think, oh, I usually ask about sleep first, because it's always important to learn about sleep and know how are they sleeping. But they're, oh, sleep's okay. Sleep's pretty good. Okay, how's your stress level, Oh, it's been really intense, So very commonly going to be one or the other of those things. if you start to see this redness showing up a little further back, sometimes you see little dots, even more heat, where there's redness and even more heat showing through with the red dots. Also fairly common to see is pretty red sides, heat in the liver gallbladder. It also shows up in stress. The liver is like the main organ that's associated with coursing our energy through the whole body. So when we get stressed out, it's a very common response in the body's energy to tighten up. So, and the liver, it just gets stagnant. They call it liver qi stagnation, another very common diagnosis, because we get stressed out, everything tenses up, and that shows up very commonly as redness along the sides of the tongue. Another common, well, I'll just keep going with the colors and then we'll talk more about different common tongues to see.
What did you say about the body shape?
Body color, I'm still on this one.
Oh, okay,
It's,
all right.
It mainly indicates the state of the yin organs. So that's when we say body color, we're just talking about the overall color of the tongue. We're not zooming in yet on different locations, but it's almost like you're looking at like the depths of the tongue. We're going to look at each other's tongues in a few minutes here, so everybody take some water. So red is heat. If you see it, the opposite of this would be pale. It's going to be cold. And then another, because again this is talking about general coloring of the whole tongue, is purple. So I say purple, but sometimes it's, just vaguely purple. It's not like it's going to be bright purple or anything, but this shows blood stasis.
Stasis
So
like
would that be
stagnation.
Stagnation, yeah. So that's body color. And like I said, normal would just be pale red. Yeah, please. So then body shape. This tends to indicate whether like more excess deficiency. So if you see a tongue, someone sticks the tongue out and it's very like kind of swollen or bigger looking, they almost sometimes will say it doesn't look like it even fits in the mouth all that well. That's going to be excess condition of some kind. And then it can be the opposite. It can be really small or thin, and that can be more deficient. Also, this body shape, that's where we start to talk about things like cracks on the tongue or fissures. Sometimes you can just see like little lines in there. Fairly common to see a line down the middle. So cracks you can see with body shape. You can see tooth marks, another fairly common thing to see along the side, like that.
Scalping?
Yes.
Scalloping they call it, or tooth marks, yeah. So you're wanting to look at all of these things. If you see tooth marks, that indicates qi deficiency. Another way I've heard this talked about is that if you're sitting a lot, like in your job or something, or in school, like students sitting a lot, learning, and you're not moving a lot, your qi can get stagnant. And so it's very common to see these tooth marks for people who don't get enough exercise and movement in their day. It also can show up with overthinking, like kind of like someone who tends to be thinking a lot, like over-worrying. So look for these tooth marks. So if you see tooth marks, I typically pretty much will be like, oh, it'd be probably good to like take some more walks or, get out and move a little more. The fissures, if you see these lines or cracks on the tongue, those usually indicate dryness, that the fluids, wherever you see it, so again we have the map, so wherever you see it, but very commonly you'll see them in the middle of the tongue in the digestive area. Usually that indicates at some point there's been heat that's kind of what they call like damaged the fluids of the digestive organs. So it's like a yin deficiency symptom. So yin, remember one of the definitions of yin is moisture, right? So the yin is the moist aspect of the body. It's really important, and if there's too much heat can dry up fluids, right? So in nature we see that. So it happens in the body. If we have too much heat over time, the fluids will naturally dry up. And so just, where is the heat? So where are the fluids going to dry up? And again, that's why this is so important to kind of start looking at tongues and really getting a feel for it, what you're seeing. And even if, well, I'll talk about that at the end. I want to just really encourage you to do it, because you only learn by doing it. So let's keep moving so we have enough time. So that's the body shape. The coating, This typically reflects the yang organs, especially the stomach, because most commonly coatings are going to be typically in the middle of the tongue or sometimes in the back of the tongue, or both. If you have the coating there, it's some kind of accumulation of dampness. And then if you see if it's a white coating, what do you think that means? Cold, yeah. And what do you think the color of heat of a coating would be? Yellow. Those are the two main coatings that you'll see. And of course, you know, again, you may, if you do this practice, start looking at tongues, people will be like, oh, I drank coffee or whatever, you know, but you'll get used to what that looks like. And you'll be able to differentiate, oh, that's a coffee, someone had coffee. That's not the coating. And then the moisture generally just indicates the body fluids of the body. Is it dry? Mainly that's what you're going to see. If it's really dry, it's heat usually that's dried up the fluids. Or if it's really wet, it's too much dampness in the body. Alright, so that's the main thing. I thought maybe we could just take a minute and look at each other's, like maybe pick either one or two other people to get together with and just join up and take a look and see if you can identify some things. Don't be shy.
Let's go first. I'm happy to go first if people don't want to go first.
So that means I see moisture skeleton. Okay, so
I'll do this so you don't have to.
So she asked about quivering. Shaky tongue means wind usually.
sometimes a lot. And a little bit of that. We're getting real.
Wow.
Wow. All those things too. No. Should we look at
Any questions? Any questions?
Scallops?
Right.
Scallops? Yeah, you see some scallops?
No, I mean, what is
What does that mean usually? It's usually chi deficiency, and that's the one where it's like kind of been sitting a lot.
Okay.
So it's good to be probably moving around more.
Sometimes I
think it was
You did? Yeah, a little bit towards the back.
yeah, it usually does that after I have coffee.
Yeah, but it's not too bad.
Milk in it too. Yeah, no, that does it.
Yeah, the milk maybe I should pour a little bit more. That's some heat. A little bit of heat.
Oh wow.
I was afraid I had some yellow.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing, isn't it? And if you want to like switch partners, because I mean the point is to look at more tongues, and everybody's tongue is going to be very different. So feel free to just mix up. Just try it. Let's take another minute. Switch around. Join.
Big fissure.
Is it? So. Right, a little too big. But just a little bit. But not. But your color is more like you have a good coloring.
You want to see this? We can get a good picture.
I should mention, I think we need to mention something, that it can change, of course, you know, and sometimes people have those cracks in their tongues and they last their whole life. So that's it's considered normal. But if they kind of develop and they go away, that's
You know,
more it's like yeah.
everyone's got.
It looks like it. You're a little like it looks like that, but that hasn't been there. So just maybe a little. Just be careful of water.
So I've never.
Go find Dad.
took a picture of my